myths, isn't it, this round. This is what we do in adult learning. Everybody introduces themselves, everybody's a bit scared of that creeping death, we've got it over with, and it is dead easy to just write it off. And what's different, I think, about the thinking environment is it's just, the round is one of the building blocks of something which is very boundaried, very simple, very elegant, but contains the paradox, freedom needs boundaries. And I think in mental health diversity, this is absolutely a key thing to bear in mind. Freedom needs boundaries. It doesn't need a one-size-fits-all set of rules that, excuse me, that it's really easy to fall foul of. But if you feel safe, and there was quite a lot of that in the round. Nobody said the word safe, but there was something about good energies, about feeling that sort of quiet calm in the middle of the sort of high energy. If you feel safe, you'll do really creative stuff. So the thinking environment, what it brings to organisations is a really quiet revolution, and it does revolutionise. This initial round starts the beginning of a culture of listening that becomes really embedded in whatever group it is you're working with. So whether that is a team, our team meetings, we're laughing, we're chatting, we're joking, but as Carl will tell you, there's a moment when we start and we just all fall silent and into listening. And it's like any discipline, isn't it? If you do yoga, it takes a while to get into it. If you do running, it takes ages to build up to doing your first 5K. And it's the same with listening. It's the same with giving somebody else attention without just thinking about your own stuff all the time. And in learning groups, it's particularly powerful. And I used to let people tell me, oh, it's all right at Northern College, it's all adults, or it's all this, or it's all that. Until Caroline and her colleagues started going out into some of the most challenging adult learning environments we have, and using the thinking environment with kids that nobody knew what to do with. It works in prisons, it works in classrooms, it works on boats, we've seen it operate, but you've got to stick with it. It doesn't work as a one-off. What it does is, it's a really values affirming process. It inevitably shares power. It's very hard to subvert, because you can only subvert by breaking the rules, and if you break the rules, it's not a thinking environment. You have to expose yourself. Subversion does damage, doesn't it? Particularly in sort of staff, teams, organisations, because it's happening under the surface, you can't quite get hold of it. It's really obvious if you don't do the thinking environment thing. It is, as I've said, culture changing, and it is literally diversity enhancing, because everybody is present, everybody is invited to be present as themselves. There's no hiding or pushing forward. It brings that equality into it. What it doesn't bring, of course, is the diversity in the room that is absent, or that people choose to keep hidden because it's invisible. We have other strategies in education to be able to do that, but it goes a long way. At least if everybody in the room can be present as themselves, we've made a start, haven't we, towards a really genuine diversity that's not about ticking boxes. So, operates in all these spaces, and we're beginning to see how it can operate in virtual spaces as well. We've invited you to come online, we've invited you to continue online with us. We work lots in a social media space called Yammer. I don't know if anybody uses Yammer, but it's like Facebook but a closed space. So a whole organisation might be on Yammer, but then different groups for different staff teams. And you can see the attention there as well, in the way that people engage with one another. Do you know what? We never have any problems. You know, there's all the sort of talk about, yeah, that people bully on Facebook. People bully on Yammer, people bully in a room, don't they? People bully by the voice, by text, whatever. But that respect that you build up in the classroom with a learning group in blended learning translates into virtual spaces. Families and relationships. My son is a really fine young man, and I know that's because he's grown up in a thinking environment. I absolutely believe that fundamentally. Lots of the students, I'm a teacher educator, lots of the students on the CERT PGCE course at Northern College, family support workers, doing that really out there work with the most marginalised families, and they're using thinking environments in their homes. And in political environments, don't mean any disrespect to anybody here, so I'll just, I'll put that caveat out there, but we call these our hard-to-reach groups. We run thinking environments with groups of local councillors, elected members at local authorities, a lot of work in Leeds, where Carl's come from. People across the political divide, utterly resistant to shutting up. Yeah? But it works slowly with a lot of resistance. Our colleague Kay Sidebottom does a lot of this work. Very, very hard work, really resisted, but it works and it's beginning to change things. The word that jumps out there is humility. Humility is often lacking in leadership, and humility is something that, you know, as people experiencing mental health diversity, we learn to live with all the time, yeah? And I love that word's in there. So in terms of mental health leadership, why the thinking environment and why the things that we brought to you today for you to explore? At the heart of the matter is the fact that in education, but I think culturally in the UK, in the Western world, maybe the whole world, there's a notion that the leader is the person at the top or the person at the front, the person who is speaking, the person who has the power. That heroic notion is written into all our stories, isn't it? There's always a hero, you know, an archetype, often a bloke, yeah, often a white bloke, often a privileged white bloke, often a gorgeous privileged white bloke, you know, a David Beckham of any time in history. We're really interested in an anti-hero approach where leadership is of the work as well as of the people. So leadership of ideas, leadership of thinking, leadership that can happen at any stage of the organisation. If you want to read more on that, expressed better than I could, there's a guy called Richard Wilson. He's done a lot of work with the Education and Training Foundation. Online you can freely get a copy of his book Antihero. It's a short book, it's a really good read. Mental health leadership is about diversity, about being present as all of yourself. So don't just be present as what you look like. Don't just be present as what people see. Whether you choose to share or not, you want to be able to feel that you can be you in a leadership environment, but also as an employee, as a volunteer, as a worker, as somebody who is led. Yeah? So I want to know that I am valued in all of my oddnesses and my quirks, and if my quirk causes there to be a bit of an issue, I want to know, causes me to make a mistake, I want to know I'm safe to be able to do that. Not excuse, not responsible, but just, you know, I can be myself. We work in organisations and institutions that discriminate just by the very nature of their structures. And what happens when you rise up the heroic leadership ladder is that you become more obedient, and what you are obedient to is those structures that continue to discriminate and oppress. So one of the jobs of mental health leadership is to dismantle what I think of as the white curriculum. And hashtag white curriculum is a movement. It's a movement on Twitter. It came out of a video made by NUS black students, which is definitely worth a watch. I'll put the link on the Padlet. At University College London, where they looked around at everything. They looked around at, you know, there are a massive amount of international students at UCL, and they'd come to study literature, and they'd only study white literature. Or, you know, an African student talks about the study of medicine, which completely ignores any developments in medicine, in health, that comes from anywhere other than Europe and America. How does that make you feel? And so they made this film, which is really powerful, but in that they define white curriculum as not just about race, you know, whiteness, not just about race, but whiteness being about everybody who doesn't fit that David Beckham ideal of Vitruvian man, you know, you can imagine the Leonardo da Vinci figure. So women on the outside of that, young people often on the outside of that, people with disabilities on the outside of it, people with, with sexuality which is not heterosexuality on the outside of it, people who choose to identify their gender in non-binary ways on the outside of the white curriculum, not seeing themselves reflected in that. And we've got a responsibility in mental health leadership to dismantle some of that thinking that we don't even know we think, so it's not easy. And with mental health diversity, with mental illness in ourselves, in our workforces, that's very much an exclusion to that white curriculum, and increasingly so. One of the things I put on the Padlet is a blog I wrote in preparation for today, just my thinking, because this has been a massive learning journey. And on there I've quoted a piece by a guy called, I think it's Ian Walsh, talking about geniuses. You know, Stephen Hawking, I watched that film at Christmas, The Theory of Everything, and I'm so institutionalised, even though I work for a lovely place, that I spent the first half of the film thinking, oh God, they're going to sack him, because he was going from becoming normal to not normal in that sense. You know, with that institutionalised, that life events can choose to topple us from work we're really, really good at. So, have a read of that. So in all of this mix is the creative potential of neurodiversity. I talked to you a little bit about brain plasticity. I'm no scientist, but neurodiversity is about taking a new approach to the way that we wired up. So what, you know, I am wired up in a way that identifies me as ADHD, for example. I choose not to use that label about myself. It makes me really creative. It makes me really exciting to be around, but I'm not very restful, am I, Caroline? So, people who work around me, I can take the rough with the smooth, and I'm dead lucky that I have people around me who I think love me for that, and for it, not despite it. But that's the neurodiversity approach. How many of us have students who come to us after they've gone through a school system where that's a label? Dyslexia is a label. Autism is a label. What about the brilliance? What about the brilliant capability? What about getting people in the place in the jigsaw that really works for them, yeah? Rather than the negative label. So we've got responsibility there. Talked, I think, throughout this about, you know, risk, being able to be safe to make mistakes, responsibly, boundaries. We don't have to be hurting other people in order to make mistakes. But as there's a guy called Louis Thomas was a biologist sort of back in the 50s, and I read, he's got a book called The Wonderful Mistake, and in it he says something like, you know, if there'd been no mistakes in DNA, it's about the development of DNA, we'd all still be amoebas, and there would be no Mozart, is what he says. So, you know, that's part of human growth. So having those safe boundaries, that safe space, the ease that the thinking environment brings, but not to restrict, not to tell people what to do, just to make it safe for them to do it. Talked a little bit about the limitations of obedience, and I just finally want to say this thing about not interrupting. Nancy Klein's a nice lady, I mean, she's proper, she's like ladylike, if you know what I mean. Lovely sort of Texas accent, gentle woman, and she came to Northern College, I think 2008, and she stood in this gorgeous room and said, in her gentle voice, interruption is an act of violence. And that's a brave thing to say when you have people in the room who might be, you know, survivors of physical violence, who might be getting bullied in the workplace, who might be experiencing all sorts of violence, who might be refugees from violent countries. But actually, and I was really shocked, and I'm like, but actually thinking about it, now I am used to really being listened to, because I operate with people in thinking environments. I feel that violence to my thought processes. If I'm doing some really good thinking, and then somebody thinks that what they think about what I think is more important than what I think. What's that about? Why would we do that to other people? So I'm nearly done, pleased to know, because it's a lot of talking all at once. But just to say about how it's structured, it's based on a really explicit values base. And I don't think we talk about values enough in education. We might talk about the values of the organisation and the mission statement, but do we talk with our students about values and what their values are, and do we share a values base? And there are 4 building block applications which build the culture. Thinking pairs, which we'll do today at some point, the thinking round, which you've done and we'll keep coming back to. And then there are a number of further applications, and you know, this is oh, there we go. Nice things on there. The further applications are more complex structures, which we don't have time to do with you today unless you really want to and you don't want to do something else. But we can continue as you go through the programme, taking it online. You might want to take up some of the coaching. If you do, there's all sorts of different models of coaching you could go for, but I'm coaching a thinking environment, so you would experience that. and I could coach you in some of these applications. So, for example, the Time to Think Council, we did one yesterday in our team. A person goes with an issue and gets the perspectives of everybody else in a sort of boundary thinking environment way, goes away, changes the world, honestly. I mean, the council's really shifted stuff. Transforming meetings is a way of putting a meeting together in a thinking environment, which is brilliant. Decisions get made really quickly and ethically in transformed meetings. But you would do things that are simple and radical. I mean, that's the keynote, simple and radical. Like, instead of an agenda item that says next year's budget, it would be, you know, how can we make more money next year? The presence of a question opens up the brain's thinking. If you went away from today and just did one thing in your meetings, putting the agenda items into questions, I think you would find would really open up people's thinking and ability to then think as themselves and to present as themselves. And, you know, just want to finish with, this is what it's about for us at Northern College. And this is what education has not been for a long time. It's been sausage factory education, because we've all been like fish on the end of wires trying to make sure that our organisations could succeed in a skills environment where we had to deliver this and, you know, that deliver like a letter, yeah, delivering learning. Teaching, yeah, where we have to work in a certain way. Social purpose education can teach any subject, but it teaches it with these values. It teaches it in this thinking environment where it is a reflexive, diverse place where everybody wins. Education can be that, but not if the people who work with us, not if we can't be leaders and also people who are diverse in their mental health. That's never going to happen, because all that's going to happen is that same sort of people are going to lead the same sort of education time and time again. Yeah.